This is a kind of different one for me. It's discussing the flat earth topic, believe it or not, and how it is shown in your Holy Bible. Um, the original concept of a flat earth was something that was pretty much wideswept to everybody. They couldn't see a far enough distance to see the arc of the world and didn't think on something at that large of a scale. So they didn't see the curvature of the earth and things like that, so they couldn't really tell anything. But they saw the warping of the sky as it went through the nighttime. And so they had this idea that we had a dome above us. Um, there are different scriptures here that I will read out to you, but the one thing that I want to get across first, I guess, here is that if this really was God, then he would have told you about the planets and perhaps even the solar system itself. And the sun was in the center, perhaps, rather than acting like we were in the center and letting people believe that. Surely they communed with God and thought they were in the center. I mean, that's how they got the idea of where the planets were and everything, was talking to God. So apparently God didn't answer him back just correctly, or maybe he didn't have knowledge. So that's kind of odd. Of course, when you find out that the Hebrews were really wearing an ephod and then using something that effectively came out to flipping coins for answers, and God was supposed to direct the coin flip, then maybe you weren't going to get quite the answers. I mean, that's about as good as shaking up a magic 8-ball, isn't it? But so there was a dome over the earth, and it really looked like a snow globe. And they figured that the dome over the top of the earth, they said it was either made out of tin or that it was crystal. And crystal quite often would, whenever. Now, what's odd about that statement in itself is that crystal isn't formed until, I think it's like 700 AD or so. So that'll prove to you that the Bible couldn't have been written until then. And, well, then you're going to say, well, crystals is like gemstone crystals. No, they have a different word for that. They have a different word for like mineral crystals versus a crystal that you could see through that was like a glass bubble that was crystal, you know, clarity glass that contained bubbles like the old glass that we used to have, like grandma's old thing. It had a little bit of bubbles into it, and that's after they figured out how to get the bubbles out of it. Before then, old glass seems to have a lot of bubblature in them. You might have even had these old glasses whenever you were a kid that have like little swirls of bubbles in them in the glass that they made. They kind of did it on purpose. Quite often they're gobletish looking. We had some that were almost like a beer colored glass, a little bit less than that, maybe yellowish brown, you know, had that tinge to them. So they had this idea where it really looked like, well, let me try to pull this up here real quick. Let me see if I can pull up Bible Flat Earth, and it should show you what it kind of looked like. Let's see. We could use any of these here because they really are the way that it says it in the Bible, but let's look at this right here. I'll try to get that in the center. Hopefully that shows up real good. But so right at the very top there, that's heaven. That's heaven. And the realm of God. And they talk about how in Psalms 104 and Deuteronomy and Nehemiah that he's in a realm of God above the firmament. And so there's the firmament, which is the thick bead of glass that goes in there. And they have the belief that the sun and the moon are the same size. Not that one is way, way larger, but farther away, like 400 times larger, but 400 times farther away exactly. And so they do seem to eclipse each other. They didn't have that. Now the sun moves in Ecclesiastes over here on the left. The sun moves, Ecclesiastes 1-5, Psalms, and Josh. So it moves across the firmament through the day, across the dome. And the firmament is described in Genesis and Job, the circle of the earth in Isaiah, center of the earth, you know, in Dan 4:10. Stars fall to earth in Isaiah, in Matthew, and in Revelation. Stars fall to earth. Well, stars fall to earth. That's weird. Well, we know about falling stars, but we don't think that nowadays we know that that's just a small little meteor burning up in our atmosphere, and it has nothing to do with one of the stars you see in the firmament. The stars you see in the firmament are way, way far away. In fact, the ancient Sumerians knew that they 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 said in their tablets that our sun is very close and one of the stars that you see in the distance, and that they are like a torch far, far away. So, somebody walks way down a path and goes almost out of distance down the mountain or whatever, and you see this just little dot moving again, like car headlights in the distance, just a little dot, or whatever. But that's where they described how that is. Whereas in the Bible, they seem to think that these stars are going to fall to earth. In fact, Revelation, they say 1/3 of the stars of heaven are going to fall to earth. And at one point, they say that they're going to trample on them. Let's see, where is this at actually? In Daniel? Or is it, yeah, Daniel 18, 8 through 10 talks about horn worship, which is probably the goat and ram and Aries, but they talk about horns. So here we go again with, bull horns and things like that, and ram's horns perhaps in the religion and stuff, and that he will throw down the stars and then trample on them. And the apologetic early thing that they said about this at about 300 AD was that because the stars can fall to earth and they're very tiny. Because you look in the sky and they're real bright, but they're little tiny. So when they come land on the earth, they're going to be pretty small, like maybe a pumpkin to smaller than that. And you'll be able to just step on them, like a hot coal falling out of a fire. That's the way they describe that a star would fall to earth. Now, stars are like our sun, and if the sun fell to earth, it would be 400 times, or I'm sorry, 40,000 times the size of earth, and therefore it would just scorch probably a little black spot like a sunspot on the sun, and we would evaporate and disappear. It might take us a little while to like bubble up and totally evaporate, but all life would be off of the planet in a matter of seconds. But then, as far as like all the earth part of it and everything would just bubble up and fry away, and we probably couldn't even tell within a few days to a few years, probably somewhere in between there, that it had even happened. But here's the way these people believed about the firmament. So I'm guessing if you believe everything in the Bible is exactly what they say, and that it's the truth of fact, that you should be believing in a flat earth. And the flat earth is immovable. You look here at the bottom, and the flat earth is immovable. It's pinned to foundations that keeps it from moving, and the sky spins around and it stays still. Of course, we know now we're rotating, but you can't believe that. You have to believe you're in a sun globe because you believe in the Bible. And what's funny is through time you'll find that as we got smarter and smarter, the Christian people and Catholics that used to go with this idea here that you see a picture of changed their total tune now. Now, whenever we figured out that the moon was way above the firmament is nothing, and that the sun is real far away, and those wandering stars are actually planets, kind of like our moon, but real far away, and one of them's got a ring around it, like Saturn. Yeah, one of the ones that the Hebrews used to worship, Saturn. And so they thought they were all gods too, by the way. So you have to think that they're not your gods, but they're other gods. Although you may want to occasionally worship Saturn because that's the one that the Hebrews worshiped the most. People think it's Yahweh, but it's not. I've gone through the Bible with a fine-tooth comb a few times, and it's definitely Saturn. Saturn is also the Star of David and the star of your god Remphan that's described in the Bible and so on, and that's all Saturn. So they did a lot of Saturn worship. But here we have the firmament and the way that it looks in the Bible. But the truth of the matter is this is not reality. that the sun is not inside of the firmament just that far away like some flat earthers think, that actually that thing is 93 million miles away. And the moon is 238,000 miles away or something like that. Anyhow, and that puts it in a perspective where it does block it out. They don't even draw the picture here where they're the same size if they blocked each other out, but they would be. And so as our technology changed, the Christians adopt that in, and so do the Hebrews. But then they go, yeah, well, that's the way it is, and God did that. And they say, well, the wandering stars are way, way far away. Now we could tell just from perspective and triangulation that these things, once we came up with the sextant and a few other things, we're like, these things are real far away. And they go, oh, well, of course they're above the firmament in heaven, in the realm of God. We don't know how far it is, but the highest one, the most high, El Elyon, Saturn, that they used to worship, is the highest one, that they were told that from the ancient Babylonians and Sumerians. And so he's the most high, so that's the one they freaked out and worshipped, because he's the most high, and they thought that must be the best one, because the farther and farther you get away from the shit of the earth, the better it must be. But I digress. But you can't believe that. You've got to keep believing in the snow globe as we get smarter and smarter, and then find out that space is not made of water, so there is no waters above, like right here, the waters above, the firmament, where there are little windows, where it exactly says in the Bible that there's actually a window in heaven that they open up, and that's what causes the flood, that they open them up a little too big, and they just leave them open. Versus opening them up and closing them real quick, and that would just be a rainstorm. That's how they make the rainstorms, is they open up these little vents and close these little vents. But all through the Bible, they talk about the circle of the earth. Isaiah 40:22 says the circle of the earth, so that would be a flat disc, and the heavens are just a tent-like canopy suspended above that. That holds back the water. And this tent-like canopy are fabric of space that we still have in our vernacular today, the fabric of time and space. But that fabric that's over there is seen in the pictures of Mithra, where Mithra has a cape, and at nighttime he pulls the cape over the earth. Yeah, that's Mithra that does that, the god of that, because on his cape he's got the stars. So, and Mithra also stands in the stance of Taurus. Most people can't catch that, but Daniel 4:10 through 11 describes a world tree, believe it or not, and you can see all of the earth. Well, from all of the earth, you could see the world tree. And we know now that if something is 1/3 of the hemisphere away, you couldn't see it, but ships, when they go over the horizon, disappear. So this world tree, even though it was tall enough to reach almost to heaven or whatever, disappears at some point when you're going across the horizon. I mean, let's say that you get in a boat and you leave England, but you can barely see it in the distance. As you start leaving and going towards America, it's going to disappear and go over the horizon. You will no longer be able to see that horizon point, but these people believe that you will be able to over the whole world. So they don't know it's round. It's a flat earth. Genesis 1:6 through 8 talks about a dome that separates the waters and divided the two, and that's what gave us air. There's waters below and waters above. Like over here, waters below, and waters above. And that whenever we had the flood, what he actually did was open up the vents up top, but then he bobbed us under the water, like you kind of take and push down on this, push us down into the water, and flooded everybody, and then let it back up. Something along that line. Oh, and they just let the vents out in the bottom, and it took it back out into space and drained the tub back to where they wanted it to be. But at that time, it was way higher than it was before, and some of that never went away. And they kind of talk about that, and I think that has to do with the fact that the Ice Age and the polar ice caps all melted away, and the actual ocean raised some 300 to 400 foot. People estimate right in that range there. They can even find ancient cities below the water, way down, 100, 150 foot easy like that. Like if they were up out of the water well and wouldn't have gotten flooded before, they were totally submerged in this time and then from then on. So that would have been the giant flood that they talked about. Matthew 4:8 talks that the devil took Jesus to a high mountain and showed him all of the kingdoms of the world and offered them to him. Well, you can't do that from one mountain. You can get on Mount Everest and you still can't see. I mean, from Mount Everest you can kind of see all the way into Mongolia, and you can see all the way over to northern Iraq and stuff, but you can't even see, I don't think, the Mediterranean from there on a clearest day, if you could see it. And so you would only be seeing, 1/4 of the heaven, or 1/4 of the earth. And you can imagine if the earth was round like this, and we were up on top of Everest right here, you could see from here to here, but you couldn't see anywhere around here and around the rest of the earth, and you couldn't see any past here and around. So, but they think that it's all of the earth, so that's what you have to think. By the way, as technology got better, and we stepped into the realm of believing that the solar system was free floating in the universe, and we finally got to get out into space and take a picture back of the planet, and it's just floating in space just like the moon, and it's all a void. And in fact, there's not water above, but there's nothing. Well, it's really something. There is. But instead of the molecules like here on Earth being so close together that even though you pinch your fingers together, you've got 1,000 between your fingers, that if you held your fingers out this wide, that there would only be 10, 20 atoms between there. The rest of it's just air. It's that much exploded out to where there's almost nothing. There's really almost nothing in space. It would be hard to vacuum up and get something out of it. And that's sure a far cry from water, right? There is no water up in space unless it's on another planet. Isaiah 11:2 talks about the four corners of the earth. Job has a lot of things where he talks out that God spread out heaven that treads upon the sea, so that they believe that it comes down on the sides here, and that there is a pillar here, and that it connects to the sea someplace over there. So if you were to go out in the sea far enough, you could go to the edge of the firmament. But other people later said that you would just fall off the edge of the planet. The firmament went past that, and it gave room for the moon and the sun to go around, and so you would just fall off. Like if it was a cup totally full of water, you couldn't put another drop of water in, and it's just about to overflow, that if you went to the edge of that, you'd fall off. And if there's a cup slightly bigger than that, over that, that would be your dome of crystal. Job 26:10 says, he compasses the waters until the day ends. And the odd thing there is the word of compass. Now, could that be the compass, the ancient holy symbol cross with a circle around it that they could lean on angles and figure out angles and cuts and crosses? That seems like for cutting, for laying lines and things like that, which seems like the Sumerians did. Or is this actually the word compass? Because the word compass doesn't come about until much, much later. No one in the world has a compass until, I'd have to look it up, but I think it's somewhere in 11 or 1200 AD before anybody has an accurate or decent compass in any way or shape or form. And I don't think anybody's playing with compasses before then. There could be some magnetic effect, and you set something on water. It's possible that they find true north that way from magnetic stones. But as far as he compasses the waters until the ends, this could be a bad interpretation of Greeks, where they were talking about, the circumference, and that he does something like that. But any of those would relate to a 360-degree compassy situation and not a dome. And so this dome situation seems to be, I don't know, odd. But then again, whenever the sun's going and cutting rays down to the earth, that's what they used a compass to figure out. And they figured out which rays and angles and stuff would actually be for the pyramid. It's about 52 degrees, and it's lines of the sun coming down and cutting at all the angles, they would, coming out of that sun. Like when the sun cuts down through the clouds. In fact, that was supposedly the inspiration for the exact shape of the pyramids. But so Job 37:18 says, "How has thou with them spread out the sky, which is strong as a molten looking glass?" And it's odd that that's in there too, because mirrors aren't around until way after AD. I mean, you might find like crystal balls and stuff happen a little bit earlier, and so it could be where they get that in glass balls and being able to do things like that and make glass. But I don't believe that they had any way to make crystal or glass at the time of doing this. So there is the sea of glass, and I don't know if they're trying to relate that to it, and maybe they found some bisqued up piece that was slightly transparent that they could look through with the light, but that would be a greenish yellow generally in form and not a blue sky. I don't know, maybe they found some areas of it that were blue, or you should know the blue was like the lapis lazuli of the Sumerians. So looking glasses, though, don't arrive, like saying a silvering the back of a piece of glass, and the piece of glass was clear enough that there was silvering on the back and you could get a mirror off of. That comes way after, like 700, 880. And I believe that the people before then would just use something very shiny. You could polish up shields, and you could also just put a pool of water down and then gaze into a pool of water, and you could see your own reflection and things like that. But that's a reflecting pool and not a looking glass. The concept of glass is not really out at this point. So it shows you a later conception of the Bible, because even in these old texts, they refer to glass. Amos 9:6 says that there's a vaulted dome over the earth. Amos 9:6. Ezekiel 1:22 says a dome over the living creatures, shining like crystal. Crystal, the glass, isn't formed until well after the BC AD thing's over with, though. So this can't quite be that they must be, you know, something odd about it. There's foundation lines in Job and Psalms. Genesis 1:14 through 17 refers to the earth being affixed to the firmament, which is covered by water, which really is a void instead of water again. Job 22:12 says, "Behold how high the stars are, and that they are stuck at equal distance from me in the glass firmament." So they feel like that they're all kind of stuck in the glass firmament, and there's a swirl in there. And you know how whenever you had some bubbles in the glass that you might get a lot of them out, but there might be a swirl running through it? Well, that swirl is your Milky Way. So it's funny how later they embrace that fact. And now in Christianity, in the end of the Dark Ages, they embraced it, and they go, "Oh, well, God created that wonderful thing that you're looking at now. So it's not this dome anymore." And then they figured out that the world was round and not flat. And that had to change and ruin everything in the Bible, that God didn't know what he was talking about when he told all these people how the world was done. And they go, "Oh, well, he just wanted them to know that, or think that they were the center of the earth, even though they're not." And I go, "Wow, so he wants you to falsely believe things? Like in him?" Yeah, so it looks like ancient man came up with the idea of the way that this was supposed to go down, and not a God. So you wonder if God ever spoke to anybody back then. Well, he spoke to Moses, you know that. But if you look that word up at Sinai, whenever God says, "I'm going to speak to the people so that they know that I am the God, Yahweh, I'm the Lord." And when you read it out, it almost seems like he doesn't speak to him. So you look at the Hebrew version of it, and it says that he does speak in thunder. The exact Hebrew word is thunder. So Moses is a thunder interpreter. And that could be a good reason why within a week or so everybody's worshiping a golden calf and totally off on the idea. Because wow, it's just a storm cloud, and you say that you can understand what the thunder means, and that's supposed to be God hiding in that cloud. Because we've seen those a lot, and they don't have anything to do with God. So they just kind of blew that off, I guess. Or they thought it was, well, Yahweh is signified by a bull. Yahweh and his Asherah are bulls or calves. So for Yahweh to come down and be mad about the calf, that's kind of a silly thing there. And until you figure out that about that time right there, that they're referring to, it's supposed to be something like 2160 BC, and it should be the age of Aries. And so you're not supposed to sacrifice bulls anymore. Now we're going to go with goats and rams. But that's not actually when it is. Exodus must be about 1725 BC, and they are way late, way late on their turning into rams. So that's not equating quite correctly. I thought at one time it might, and I even tried to push the date back to then, but everybody else has pretty much proved that it must have happened around 1725 to get the lineage after that corrected all. So, anyhow, this is your model in the Bible. And so if you believe in the Bible, you believe that the world has a firmament dome, and that the space station isn't really there, and that nobody ever went to the moon, and that the space shuttle and nothing's ever been up in space whatsoever, and that there's a crystal dome over the Earth. Although nowadays you might think of it as being a high polymer plastic. Yeah, but we don't think that anymore. We know that that's not true. I mean, we know that whenever you look at the stars at nighttime, like something very much like this, that stars are not affixed in the dome, but let's see if we can get it to look like it. You can see the warping and slight fisheye lens effect that it gets off of our atmosphere. As it comes down through the middle here, you can see it coming down through the middle, and you'll see it warp out like this. Especially whenever the Milky Way part of it comes down, you can see the bend in the Milky Way, and as it comes across now, it straightens out. And now it's pretty straight, and then it's going to bend up like that, watch, as it gets across here, and the bottom part starts bending in. So it definitely gets an odd shape to it, but this is what early man was staring at. There's Jupiter coming across, one of the gods, the king of the gods. We'll probably find Saturn here in a few more turns in the sky, but there's Orion upside down up there. The ancient sky, though, is something everybody watched very, very intently. They thought that the gods were there, and it was a symbol of God. And I guess you can see all the little bubbles in the glass, perhaps, that they thought. And it does look 3D to the eye, but it does not let you believe the depth that we're talking about, that some of those stars we're looking at up close, and some of those stars are far away. And the far away ones are 100,000 times farther than the ones that are close. And when we say close, we're talking about 100,000 times the distance of the sun to ourselves. That's just odd that it would be that far away. It all spins around in a pattern like this, and that would be focused right there in that pinpoint on the northern star. And they knew the northern star and how the seasons pivoted up. And through the seasons, it'll slightly go up and it'll slightly go down, little degrees, and change slightly. But there's Arcturus going down, Vega at the far right if it comes into view. And look how the bulge happens through the Milky Way in the middle. And when the Milky Way comes down, how it curls. Can you catch that in the video there? I believe so. How it twists and pumps. And so they just know something special is going on. And it looks like, so you would think that this dome that was over us, if it was a dome over us, how is this dome going around and around and around us if it's only a half shell like they say in the Bible? It almost doesn't make sense, because there has to be a bottom half that keeps coming up over here at the edge. So there has to be a bottom half and a top half that spins around. So it would be a ball. I mean, even if this is true and the glass plate thing that right now this side is showing to us, but what's already gone under is going to be turning under and coming back up on this side and going around, and it's going to make a ball, that goes around us, and this warp would even make you think so. But they didn't have that. They only had a dome, but the dome is movable. Apparently it pivots and twists, and the bubbles twist in that. Just an odd thing. But this is where we get stuff from. So here's another odd one for you. Now we figured out that the universe is giant and it all started from a big bang. And it's funny how Christians and Catholics have ditched the little glass globe little thing here where everything was centered around us. And we were the little center of the universe because we were the universe. Because just above the moon was this firmament thing. So everything is all about us and there is nothing else. Suddenly turns into this giant, vast cosmos of millions of stars inside of each galaxy and then millions of galaxies. And the Christians, instead of saying, well, then, what they say is, oh, well, God caused the Big Bang. See? And it's like, well, hold on, you can't keep changing your story. This unchanging story, that never changes, keeps changing. You turned it from, oh, he made some of the stars outside the firmament, to all of a sudden the firmament is not a firmament, to all of a sudden the waters above the earth are gone and they're not there anymore, to the fact that we're spinning around instead of the sun, instead of the glass firmament that's spinning around, to the point that everything is millions of miles away. There's the sign of the Southern Cross that everything dies on December 25th, by the way. Maybe it's, and it just keeps going and going and going on the fact that every time we find out more science, they just jump God on top of that, too. There's the Southern Cross going down in the corner. And so now we figured out that it's vast, it's huge, it's gigantic, and we're selfish and self-centered to have thought even in the first place that was all about us. And you can see that God created everything and that we're not really anything special out of all of it, and it makes us very tiny and minuscule, and we don't like that feeling. So we keep grasping onto the idea that He made everything for us, and all those stars with all the planets possibly going around, every single star that you see, every twinkle you see in that dot, every dot you see has got planets going around it. And if 1 out of 1,000 of them had a planet that could sustain life on it but didn't, and 1 out of 1,000,000 of those actually had an Earth-like atmosphere, there's Jupiter. If they had an Earth-like atmosphere, that small of a number, 1 out of 1,000,000, 1 out of 1,000,000, that in our own galaxy there would still be 100 million inhabitable planets. That would be just like Earth. And God created all those too. And they're not for us, and we're not on them. Isn't that sad? No, it's not sad, it's beautiful. For He created everything, and we're pretty selfish to have thought it had anything to do with us, probably in the first place, Really, it has very little to do with us, and a whole lot to do with the entire universe, which we are a small part of. Like saying the little speck of dirt under your fingernail is a small part of your body right now. Or that freckle that's over there on near your elbow on your arm, that little bitty freckle, that's part of you too. But just a part. Is it significant? I'm not sure how significant we are to God. He doesn't seem to show up and do a lot for us, but after we find out the vastness of the universe, I guess He's kind of busy, and we are not the focus of His attention. Clearly, we haven't seen Him in thousands and thousands of years, if we even ever saw Him at all. Or were people just flipping coins and making up stories on glass globes and domes and waterfalls? That'll do it for this time, guys. I appreciate you. Like it if you like it. Subscribe if you will. Take care.